Hey guys, we're back at the Open Source Summit in Dublin. This one's for Europe compared to North America, but we're also here talking to Daniela Barbosa, who's the Executive Director of the Hyperledger Foundation, and they had their own event here a couple of days ago, so we're going to be talking about all things related to blockchain. Daniela, welcome.
Welcome, it's great to be here.
I'm not sure that a lot of people know exactly what Hyperledger is, so maybe you want to describe that a little bit, because there's blockchain like Ethereum and it's more public, and that tends to get all the noise in the headlines, but it seems like enterprises are starting to line up more on a private blockchain.
No, well actually enterprises are in the continuum of public and private today. Maybe in 2016 or 2017, enterprises were very focused on permissioned private distributed ledger frameworks. And there's big deployments of those against trade finance and healthcare and supply chain. Today I think there's an actual continuum of companies that are very interested in public blockchain and the different layer ones, for example, that are out there in the different use cases. And here at Hyperledger Foundation, and we also had our member summit, so we had two events for the price of one. We had our members and our community really talking about true and proven technologies like Hyperledger Fabric that's been around since 2016 and deployed in most enterprise permissioned networks, but also in exciting new projects like Hyperledger Besu, which is an Ethereum client, number 3 on the Ethereum execution client list. One is Geth, 2 is Ergon, 3 is Besu. So we are really comprehensive of where the market and the enterprise is going with distributed ledger technologies and related tech as well, and identity, for example, and more.
Is it your sense that most of these projects are moving from the pilot stage, or are they still in pilot, or are they starting to show up more in production environments?
This varies by industry. It varies by use case. So, unfortunately, there's still a lot of people thinking that blockchain is an answer to a problem that they don't have. So those projects might start as a pilot and maybe don't go anywhere. But what we see enterprises, we see executives talking about the efficiency gains that they're seeing, the ROI gains that they're seeing within the implementations. It's not sexy, right? The media doesn't want to talk about it because it doesn't have some guy on the top talking about cryptocurrencies, and there's lots of great stories. And very often, you've been in an enterprise software space forever, right? Couple of things. One is you don't get the opportunity to talk about it because your corp comms people don't really want to talk about it. And if there's a word that is shaky or is a little bit scary in the marketplace like blockchain, most likely you don't want to talk about that, right? And you're building consortiums with hundreds sometimes of partners in these communities. So you have to have agreement from everybody to be able to talk about what you're building in these blockchain networks. The other thing is people are still worried about, I say this all the time, you go on a website, right, and you don't say, hey, this was built with a database, an SQL database, isn't this website amazing? You just use that website, you don't know what's powering it, right? We had Saudi Aramco talk about their use case in invoicing. They have onboarded 11 vendors since March of 2021. Now, these are vendors that they're spending a lot of money with, right? It's Saudi Aramco. They are seeing efficiency gains. They're seeing their customers or their vendors using the application, but they don't talk about blockchain. They don't go to their vendors and say, hey, you got to onboard into our invoice portal because it's blockchain. No, they say, hey, we just built something that's more efficient, that allows us to reconcile invoices much quicker, and allows you to get money faster. Would you like to participate? Right. And that's what people are missing, I think, in the story.
Are these brand new use cases, or are they in some instances replacing, say, a traditional SAP ledger that they were using for some purpose one way or the other, but this wound up being a little more efficient because it's more distributed?
Yeah, I think the processes are the same. There are new businesses being built on top of blockchain networks for sure, right? But these, the example I just gave you, there are existing businesses. They had to pay their vendors before they implemented this new, this new platform for them. So I think it's a combination of both.
Right. Will we consume it, to your description before about it's a database and I'm just using it, is that going to be consumed more as a service provided by somebody in the cloud versus something that I build myself and deploy? Because most of the folks that I talk to who are deploying it, they have major IT squads, so it's not really something for, the mid-market just yet, but maybe it will be as a service.
Yeah, so first I want to clarify my description of the database. I'll change that story and say, when you go to a website and you don't think, hey, this great experience is JavaScript, as a user you don't know. So that's what I meant, not that blockchain is a database, but we all know that. So to answer your question, yes. We need, networks will need to provide nodes as a service for a couple of things. One reason is there are certainly just some companies that are not large enough. They don't have IT departments that can run their own infrastructure, that can run their own node. So we're seeing companies, like for example, AWS, that has blockchain as a service, and they're offering managed services on top of that. And there's many others. There's small and there's big cloud services providers that do that. So I think there's always going to be a need if you're going to build a distributed network that has multi, participant, small, medium, large. You're going to have to do that.
There was also a lot of talk during the conference about digital currencies and using blockchain as the base for that. The EU is experimenting with this. A lot of countries are starting to think about it at least. There's some examples, I think, in Cambodia and some other places where people are doing some interesting things. What is the future of money as we think about it right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great work happening in the Hyperledger Foundation across various projects. Right now, in one of the workshops, the Banque de France, who just joined the Hyperledger Foundation as an associate member, along with the Central Bank of Cambodia, joining the Bank of England, the Boston Fed, the MAS. These are organizations that have developers and IT folks that are actually in the code, developing the code and the processes. So we've been tracking central bank digital currencies for about 18 months, and to see how the adoption of those projects are going. The first retail CBDC was in the Bank of Cambodia, a project Bakan. That was a retail CBDC built with a project called Iroha, Hyperledger Iroha, and they've seen thousands of transactions in peer-to-peer distribution. So I think that we're going to see, it's still early. I think there was a big rush to get things done, and Maya Santamaria, who is the minister from the Minister of Finance here in Ireland, spoke on a panel on CBDCs, and she mentioned, we're very still, early on what it's going to look like. Is it going to need a distributed ledger? Is it going to be something else? But the push is that with DM coming along, when Facebook made that announcement, all the central banks woke up around the world and said, we need to do that. What's happening in China with the yuan, with the digital yuan, we need to figure out a way, and there's going to be multiple approaches. What works for the Eastern Caribbean Bank is not going to work for the Fed in the US.
It seems there's also a lot of confusion about, well, if I have an immutable platform where all the changes can be seen by everybody, how do I deal with confidentiality? Because a lot of these banks want transactions that are, super, super private. You
Sure.
can imagine the Swiss might be having a conversation about this.
Absolutely.
So, are we going to try to strike a balance between these things, or how will we get there?
Yeah, it's a myth that you can't have privacy of your data if you're participating in a blockchain consortium at all. I'll give you an example. So we have a project here at the Linux Foundation that's called OpenIDL. And OpenIDL is for insurance regulatory reporting to the states in North America. So every state commissioner of the insurance commissioner has a requirement that the insurance carriers report back to them the information around the drivers, who has car insurers, basically. I could tell you that the insurance carriers don't want to tell each other who their customer base is, right? But they have a regulatory requirement that's being put into place that they have to do it, and they have to do it in the same format, and they have to be able to look at each other's data to figure out if there's things that shouldn't be doing. So regulatory requirement is making them come together in a consortium to do this, and then blockchain is the way to do it with the privacy architecture, making sure that each carrier and other participants in that network don't see the data that they shouldn't see. You and I are having a transaction. I give you the rights to see the data that I have. That gentleman over there just needs to know that it happened. He doesn't need to know, he just needs to confirm that that transaction happened, so then I can go on with my business. So I think it's maybe a myth, or maybe people haven't looked at the architectural documents very closely.
Could be. One of the other issues is we hear a lot about sustainability, especially here in Europe. People want to know where the coffee came from, and they want to know what went into it for producing energy, carbon, all kinds of stuff. Is that going to be a use case for blockchain because it's going to provide the mechanism by which we will have increased transparency into where things come from?
Absolutely. So I think early on in 2016 and 2017 when the Hyperledger Foundation started talking about use cases, we actually used the coffee use case quite a bit, right? Because it really puts together the farmer, right? The farmer that is looking for a market to bring his coffee into place, and it puts into place the consumer, so the consumer understands where that's going. It also, along the supply chain, all the people that touch that product, and how do you get money to them faster? How do you make sure that if it needs to be tracked back into a specific spot where it got missed or something went wrong with the shipment, all the supply chain, value chain along there. So we've been talking about those use cases for a while, but that also has a lot of climate impact approaches, right? If you think about the EV and the car manufacturing movement, right? EV cars are great, they save oil and gas, but you know what? They're made out of batteries, and those batteries get mined from mines in Africa and other places, and there's slave labor that is sometimes pulling out those mines. How do you do that whole supply chain with accountability across that multi-vendor enterprise view, right? So I think that there's a lot of opportunities in climate accounting. Trust is one, right? You want to trust. There's a lot of greenwashing of data. I planted 1 million trees. That's great. Can you prove it to me that you planted 1 million trees? And then can you also prove that those 1 million trees actually grew up to be a carbon positive for the world, not a negative?
There's also been a lot of fraud over the years and a lot of transactions. So is this a way to kind of get at some of that issue as well? Because we have instances where people are selling things that aren't really what they say they are, and this becomes a bigger issue. And it can also be healthcare fraud or whatever it is. But if we have this more immutable framework, is that some way that we're going to get after what, frankly, is a multi-trillion-dollar industry?
It's providence, right? And we have the diamond supply chain, right? Another great use case for 5 years. The Kimberly process has been running on Everledger. It's a Hyperledger Fabric implementation. That is a way to track the provenance of the diamond and also the transfer. So if you sold me a diamond, I wouldn't pay you very much for it, but I would take it, and then I have the provenance of where that diamond came and how many people had potential hands. Now, I don't need to know who had all the hands on it, but that there was 5 owners, for example. We're seeing this in wines. We're seeing it in high-value art, obviously with NFTs and kind of the digital signature on these things. I'll give you an example. It's a great experiment. Just this week, they're going to start burning. And when I mean burning, Damien Hirst is an artist. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He painted a very large picture. He cut it up into 10,000 pieces. They sold those 10,000 pieces as NFTs. And everybody that bought one had for a year, they had this NFT. And the NFT was that at the end of the year, they had to make a choice whether they wanted a physical piece of paper or they wanted the digital NFT. And the physical piece of paper will get burned or the NFT will get burned. You need to make a decision at the end of the 1 year. Next week in their gallery, they're going to be burning the decision makers who did the paper version of the art piece. And Damien Hirst is a very, very popular painter, so that piece of paper is worth a lot of money, that art piece. That is built with Hyperledger Besu, which is our Ethereum client. And it allows, from that point also from a sustainability perspective, because you're not running all those transactions on a public proof of work blockchain, it really helps the marketplace as well. So yes on provenance, yes on traceability, and yes on value.
It feels like we're at the cusp of a shift where a lot of people who got involved early were building pilot projects and then trying to figure out what the business use case was. It almost seems like we're going to flip it now, where people are going to understand what the business use cases are, and then there's going to be more people launching projects with the platform because they're going to understand it. It's very hard to build something on the IT side and then hope they will come.
Yeah.
So, are we kind of at this transition point?
Right, well, I mean, it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about enterprises, right, that's going to be the case, right? You see innovation labs pop up all the time. Well, now we have the blockchain innovation labs, or now we have the cloud computing innovation labs, and now we have the AI innovation labs, right? That's how they allow their employees and their structure to go outside of their normal business so that they can innovate, so that they can build new businesses, right? That's just enterprises, and those cycles will continue to go. The proof is in the pudding. You know, when I started at Hyperledger in 2017, we used to get those calls from someone who's like, I just got out of an executive meeting, large company executive meeting, and my C-suite said, you got to do something with blockchain. What do I do? That's just not the right approach, right? It's good if you want to experiment. Well, what's your business like? Oh, you do this. Well, here's 5 use cases that you might want to experiment with. We have companies that run hackathons and have for years where they allow their employees to build solutions and come up with things that solve your business problems. Don't worry about what technology to use, and then bring it into a hackathon, and then we'll pick 2 to 3 to take it into MVP or POC, depending on the structure that it's there. That's the kind of innovation that enterprises need to do, whether it's with blockchain or any other technology that they're looking at, in my opinion.
How do people get involved with you guys, or is there a form I fill out somewhere, or do I just show up and kind of start hanging out with people?
Yeah, well, you know, open source communities are open. All are welcome. We've been here for 3 days, 1 day with just our members, which is an amazing way to understand what their strategy is in the market, and the other 2 days with our global community. We had people coming from all over the world. Our Brazil regional chapter, for example, they were all, a large group of them were here for the last 2 days. Our India regional chapter, Africa, our members from around the world. You can show up at events, and we're so excited to actually have. You can see the last 3 days, I have enough energy for the next 3 months, just being with people as well. We are all welcome. I just had a conversation with a young woman that we do diversity scholarships, and she came from Bolivia for 3 days in Dublin to spend time with the Hyperledger community, and it was the most inspiring thing for me to have sponsored. You know, the Hyperledger Foundation sponsored, and we do quite a few with the support of our sponsors. So those are the kind of things, people just show up. We have, if you go to hyperledger.org and you click on participate, you can see our chats, our community meetings. Pretty much on any day you can jump on a community meeting and you'll be welcomed, and people will share with you what they're working on. We have events, we have meetups, virtual and in person now, that you can participate. Over 80,000 people participate in our Hyperledger meetup community. There's so much ways to get involved. I know it's confusing sometimes because Hyperledger Foundation, we're 15 projects, we have 10 special interest groups, we're hundreds of companies. We really cover hundreds of use cases, so how do you get involved? Just show up, ask the person there, this is what I love, this is what I'm passionate about, how do I get involved? And I hope they'll tell you, I know they'll tell you exactly how to get involved.
So, get out your little crystal ball. Where are we a year from now?
Where are we from a year from now? I think that we are going to be, the Hyperledger Foundation is going to be a much stronger community. Today, things, digital identity, for example, are topics, decentralized identity. We just launched a new course on self-sovereign identity with partnership with the Linux Foundation training organization. 5 years ago, we launched an enterprise blockchain course, an edX course, a free course. Over 200,000 people have taken that course, and we update it every year. And talk about educating the market. In 2016, 2017, we needed to do that. We needed to have business and technical leaders understand what enterprise blockchain was all about. Yesterday, we just launched SSI's, a self-sovereign identity edX course, same thing, free, really for business and technical users, because essentially, you're going to have to be facing these decisions in your product development. You're going to be having to face these decisions in the partnerships that you have, right? One company always partners and has networks with others. Digital identity is going to be core to things, so I encourage everyone to do that as well. So in the year's time, I hope that we have more companies that are willing to talk about the work that they've done. The last 2 days, you saw a lot of the companies, large brands, talking about the work that they're doing and the results that they're seeing, so we'll see more of that. I also am very, very excited about the conversions of kind of the coming to the middle or the central point of those those that are working on public blockchains and those that have for many, many years actually worked on the distributed ledger technology, the core blockchain principles, right? Public blockchains are blockchains. Everything that we've been working on for the last 7 years is blockchains as well. The community's coming together. So for example, we just had Casper Labs join, we have Hedera, we have Consensus. Ethereum Foundation just did a presentation yesterday around their client incentive program that they awarded to Hyperledger Besu. These are things that are happening. I believe that the Hyperledger Foundation over the last 6 years has got us to this point due to enterprise developers, and I just am so excited about what we continue to build.
All right, folks, you heard it here. The future is here once again. It's just, as always, unevenly distributed. Danielle, thanks for being on the show.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for...
All right. Did I get all my talk?